May, what's my plan of action? Grass is just starting to grow. Got to go around, find every single broken fence post, things that have fallen down. We have a neighbor with a bunk silo. He puts all his trash in a bunk silo. It all kind of blew off all over the hillside. We had a lot of heavy snow and ice, a lot of trees down. And so I'm gonna have to do a lot of cutting, clearing, chipping. And you can see right over there's some trees down. Get that all cleared out. Also at this time I want to prune branches to get above the roll cage on my tractor and be ready for the cows when they show up.
What are we looking at here?
So what are we looking at here? This is it's a 1 acre field that I believe it was 2017 was the last time I grew produce commercially on it. And it was a acorn squash crop. Went to winter rye. The next spring I planted a 3-way clover mix with red clover, yellow sweet clover, and a white clover. And then when I planted the 3 clovers in the spring, the rye came up, grew it to full maturity, rolled it down, the clover came through it, all the rye resprouted. The second year, the rye wasn't as thick, and I top seeded with hairy vetch in the mix as well. And so the fall of the first season, all the clovers were flowering, so I mashed down rolled down the clovers. Hairy vetch was the next spring. And so then this has been, I've timed it for when the hairy vetch sets pods, then I go ahead and I roll it again because I wanted all this seed. So this is now 4 years later. And what an incredible hairy vetch stand. Yeah. You should get about, 90 to 100 pounds of honey off this acre right there. And that's a hell of a return. I think like around 90-ish pounds of nitrogen per acre, just with the roots. But look at the power of grazing on this one. Let's go graze that one. We can put on a lot of muscle with all that protein there.
What would you recommend folks that want to add a perennial tree or permanent crop to their current operation? What is the math or economics behind just taking out one of these rows out of production? And
it's different depending on whatever the crops are,
yeah,
which is dependent on where you're located in the country. But some of the math, that's where agroforestry has come up with the term, the land equivalent ratio. And I'm going to refer back to some PhD research that's been done with walnuts and corn. And if you had 1 acre and you're growing corn, you're going to get 100% corn. That's the top yield that you'll get. Well, if we now take 20% of that, we'll put and if we look at this right here, we've got a row of apples, row of hazelnuts, and then over there another row of hazelnuts. This ends up being 2 acres. But if we take 20% of the land out of crop production, now we're only going to get 0.8 out of that main crop. And I used corn as an example. But now if we grow walnuts there, there, and there, because the spaces are so wide, the alleys are so wide, we can put the trees closer together within the row because they'll get their sunlight out instead of evenly around. So you can put about 50% of the walnuts on that piece of ground that you would get ordinarily if it was solid walnut. So you got 0.8 for corn, 0.5 for walnuts for a land equivalent ratio of 1.3. And that's where you get the increased yields out of it. That's how it pencils out.
So that's what if someone didn't want to mess around with harvesting fruit or nuts, you would recommend walnuts.
If somebody doesn't want to harvest these, I use these little harvesters called pigs.
Yeah. So but if you want to go vegetables, right? I mean, you can go vegetables right here.
You want to grow vegetables on this? This is rocket fuel right now.
Yeah.
This is rocket fuel.
So would you just turn it over right now if you want to do vegetables, or would you wait?
I'd start now to get this to start to decompose.
Yeah.
And then around here we really don't get planting until mid to late May at the earliest, typically. And so this is also a great example. This is alley cropping. This is our perennial crops. We have apples on one side of the field, we have hazelnuts on the other side of the field. Then we have whatever our crop is in the alley. It could be annual crops, it could be corn, could be beans, could be the rye, wheat, or you could go to pasture like this, and now we graze it. Now it's a silvopasture system. Honey is also part of that system. So with that system in place, that perennial system in place, we have different options that we can play depending on the conditions. Last year we had no rain. It was really, really, really super dry. It would have been foolish for me to plow it up and grow a vegetable crop that demands a lot of water, because it would have had to have been irrigated all the time, and you'd go broke paying for that pump. Whereas this year it looks like we've got a good enough start. This will actually decompose. Whereas last year, if you tilled stuff under, it might not even decompose well. It was so dry. So we have options with the perennial system.
Yeah.
And timing, observation and timing is everything. And what is interesting about this, I don't know if he's still recording.
That's rye.
This is the third year of rye. Just mash it down, it's resprouted. As you can see, there's a lot less rye than before. And remember when we were here earlier in the season, you could see the darker green lines where I had band applied Idaho rock phosphate in 2020. Look at this, look at this, look at this. Can you see the darker green band? The darker green band? Guess where I did vegetables last?
In the darker green band.
It's
or the lighter
faint.
green band.
There's dark, light, dark, light, dark, every 6 foot apart. That's where I would have band applied. If you look real closely, you can see each place where that's been. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 places. Come over here and look at this one. Can you see these lines?
Yeah.
The rye came back more vigorously. One of the interesting things with the chestnuts, these are all hybrid chestnuts, is many of them are susceptible to chestnut blight. And there's so many of them now that are dying, that are coming out.
Oh!
That we're going to do a big removal. We've had heavy snow this winter with ice and rain and a lot of trees down. So we're going to take the opportunity this year to get a forestry mulcher, mulch the perimeter, mulch out all these broken trees, and I'm going to remove a metric shirt ton of chestnut trees.
Chestnut tree, yeah.
Just drop them. So back to perennials.
Do these all have blight then?
Most of them have some blight, yeah. And some of them, this one has evidence of it, but it's still producing just fine. And I don't care that they get the blight as long as I get chestnuts. It's when they are so susceptible to it that they don't even produce nuts that bothers me.
What is the market? What does the market for chestnuts look like? What does someone do with a bunch of chestnuts? For chestnuts,
basically they're washed in a produce washer, with a light sanitizer, and put into 50-pound mesh bags, and you sell them to any wholesaler across the country. They're sold, by the thousands of, tons. But this patch right here, this is a 28-year-old asparagus patch. It's way past its so-called productive life, but it still puts out well over 1,000 pounds a year. And that right there.
I knew
that's the one you wanted. Okay,
I was gonna say. There you go. I didn't know if you were gonna say no. I had to eat it, but
yeah. You can eat.
It's May 2nd. We got asparagus.
Yeah, that's my favorite vegetable. If I had to eat asparagus every day, I would be okay with that. Just wanted to show you this. You can really see how the swale it's been filled in as tillage has caused that soil to creep. And that field on the other side of the trees almost perfectly level because of the tillage, and it's filled in the swale.
So it's go ahead, sorry.
When it causes, because of the layout, it causes all the water to creep toward the ridge. You can see the downhill slope. It's all slowly going that way toward the ridge, which is the opposite way that water naturally flows. It flows away from the ridge. We're sending it to the ridge. If I lived in an area where Chinese chestnuts reliably grow and don't get killed by winter damage, I would go ahead and still put them fairly close together. Most, say, Red Delicious apple, Golden Delicious apple, Granny Smith, those are varieties. They're a clone, they're a grafted clone of one particular plant. Most chestnuts are not varieties, but there are families that have known characteristics. And so what I would do is I would plant, pure Chinese genetics from specific family lines that, have done well in my region. And then I would plant them close together, like 6 feet apart. Reason why 6 feet is a number that I go with is that universities say that you should put them 30 feet apart. Well, some of these trees, they start producing when they're this tall. They're wind pollinated, and if it's 30 feet away, it may not get pollinated for one. And then if it's this tall and it's producing nuts, and then 30 feet away there's another one that produces nuts, only a handful of nuts, you could have put another 2, 3, 4 trees in that same space. So if I go 6 feet apart, 6 times 5 is 30. I get 5 trees in that space. Now, because they're family line breeding, they're not cloned cultivars, there's going to be variability. So now I pick my favorite one. When they start to bump into each other, now I remove the one that's not producing the way I want it to. And so then eventually you get a wider and wider spacing.
Yeah. So did that happen here where because you had one there, so obviously there was
some of that has happened here. So you see there's a wider space between those two over there.
Yeah.
The one on the right is, looks really hammered. It's probably not producing very much. This one right over here, it's this one with this wide spread. It's got the blight like crazy, but it produces a ton of nuts. This other huge one over here produces a ton of nuts. I don't have to remove those trees. If they get the blight, they die on their own, so they thin themselves naturally. And look at that later. But this one right here, it's got the blight, and it just produces tons and tons and tons of nuts. And that's what I want. I want the nuts.
Yeah.
The tree doesn't have to look pretty to me. So this may look a little strange, but I can explain. See if we can get in here easily. Let's go. Yeah. But what's this with the plastic bags?
I would assume something to do with mushrooms.
Well, it was probably by now 8 or 10 years ago when I started to experiment with inoculating whole trees with mushroom spawn. And so that's basically what I did is I cut the tree down and make a wedge in the tree, pull the wedge out, inoculate with sawdust spawn, put it down, and I screw it in place, make it nice and tight, and then put the bag over it and tie it up. And so what ends up happening is that whole tree gets run full of spawn, and there could be 200 or 300 pounds of oyster mushrooms coming off of this right now from just like a handful of spawn. So instead of taking out, let's go over here, we'll show you a regular totem. Now I don't remember the price of the spawn, but this is 1, 2, 3 chunks of wood and then a small cookie on top of it. And it's smooth a piece of the ground, and then put some spawn. I use a paper sack, put the paper sack on the ground, put some spawn on the bottom of the paper sack, first disc of wood, then I put more spawn, second disc of wood, more spawn, third disc of wood, more spawn, cookie on top, then put the plastic bag loosely on top like this. And you let the spawn run for a couple, 3 months, and that'll be producing oyster mushrooms by this fall. You notice how white this is now? This has only been here 3 weeks, and you can even see, even in the heartwood, how white it is. And it's not this yellow, it's like white.
Yeah.
That whole stump right there, the whole log is all completely run full of spawn. So if I use 1, 2, 3, 4 cups of spawn on that one little log, and maybe get 10 pounds of mushrooms off, that kind of stuff, I can use 1 cup of spawn, put it in here, and it runs through the whole dang tree. And so I can just have way, way, way more mushrooms from the same amount of spawn. What happens when a piece of wood is decayed by mushrooms? What happens to it? It just rots. It turns into the dirt. Yeah. And so what I'll do is in another couple months, I'll pull the plastic bags off of this and then just leave it. Just let it all rot. So once you start producing your own seed, now you can start producing your own seedlings. Now all of a sudden it makes all kinds of sense to have your own accelerated breeding program instead of waiting for universities to come up with like the select cultivar that answers all the questions. You just start cramming more trees in the ground, and if they can't survive, you don't care. If they don't produce the way you want, you cut them down and grow mushrooms on them. And then the ones that are left behind are a site-adapted land race of hazelnuts, chestnuts, walnuts, whatever it is that you're looking for. And the ultimate dump for the product, if you have too much product, you can't find markets or whatever the deal is, are the pigs. And so to have a perennial system like this woody crop system, yes, we're going to sell chestnuts at $10 a pound, you bet. We may not sell $5 million worth of chestnuts in the course of a year, but you know what? You can sell every single beef animal that walks off this farm, and you can sell every single pig that walks off this farm. You know, this bluff, and so it's a lot more, you know, eroded. But part of what I wanted to show you that kind of relates to what we were talking about before is we just planted another 1,200 chestnut trees out here. And these ones we put in at really close spacing because we know we're going to lose some that just won't survive transplanting. We know some will get blight, and we know some won't survive the winter. And we have them extra close together because we want to have the numbers to choose from. We can out hear there's chorus frogs and toads. The toads are breeding right now. Some of the ponds, the duck ponds on the North Ridge there, it was just boiling with toads last night.
Yeah.
That tiny little pond up there, it's at the key point of this primary valley. And so at that key point, we dug a hole, and then it fills full of water, and then we dug outlet channels that go slightly downhill, about a 1% slope. So when that pond fills up, instead of the water going down the valley and being gone forever, it fills up, comes out here, it's got more time to soak in the ground, and by the time it goes the 1,200 feet that it goes, it's only 12 feet down. Whereas if it went straight down that valley, 600 feet, it's down 100 feet and it's gone from the property. So this took the water that fell and spread it out and gives it opportunity to soak in. And where it spreads at the ridge, right on the shoulder, it goes level and it sheets across the shoulder. And so last year, where was the last place where we had green grass?
Here, yeah.
Right down in here. Because for 25 years we've been catching the water, soaking it in the ground. Can you get the frogs? You hear that with the mic? Why would an organic farmer want frogs and toads? They eat like half their body weight in insects a day, so there's insect control. Then if you're listening to the birds, all kinds of birds out here. And one of the things with frogs and toads, even if you're using organic sprays, amphibians get about 50% of their oxygen from the atmosphere. So if you spray, a rhyenia or rotenone or something, that other things that are usable in organic systems, pyrethrum, you're going to make your frogs and toads sick. So by using a pest control product, you're eliminating some of your pest control. So that's my pest control. I just love seeing the water flow. That's great. That's great.